The perfect lie. The morning I decided to disappear, I made coffee for my husband exactly the way he liked it. 2 sugars, no cream, and watched him drink it while reading the financial section, completely unaware that by evening I would be dead. At least that's what everyone would believe. The truth is far more complicated and infinitely more dangerous. Chapter 1. The Anniversary. My name is Charlotte Marsh, and today marks 5 years since I made the biggest mistake of my life, marrying Thomas Brennan. I'm standing in our pristine kitchen in Millbrook Heights, watching my reflection in the chrome surface of our expensive espresso machine, and I barely recognize the woman staring back at me. 5 years ago, I was Charlotte Pierce, a magazine editor with opinions, dreams, and a laugh that Thomas said could light up a room. Now, I'm Charlotte Brennan, the perfect wife who smiles at dinner parties, remembers everyone's birthdays, and never contradicts her husband in public. The transformation has been so gradual, so expertly orchestrated, that even I didn't notice it happening until it was almost complete. Charlie. Thomas calls from the dining room, using the nickname that once made me feel cherished, but now sounds like a leash being tugged. The Hendersons will be here in an hour. Did you remember to chill the wine? Of course, I call back, my voice pitched in that sweet, accommodating tone I've perfected over the years. The wine has been chilling since noon. The appetizers are arranged on our wedding china. The house is spotless, not a book out of place, not a throw pillow askew. Thomas appears in the doorway, tall and handsome in his perfectly pressed shirt, his dark hair artfully tousled in a way that takes him 20 minutes to achieve each morning. He surveys the kitchen with the critical eye of a man who has grown accustomed to perfection, and finding nothing to fault, he smiles. "You've outdone yourself again," he says, crossing to me and placing his hands on my shoulders. His touch, once electric, now feels like a weight. What would I do without my perfect wife? The question hangs in the air, and for a moment, I consider telling him that tonight he might find out. Instead, I lean into him, playing my role. "You'll never have to find out," I whisper against his chest, and I feel him relax, satisfied by my predictable response. But Thomas doesn't know about the envelope hidden behind the cleaning supplies in the utility closet. He doesn't know about the bank account I've been funding for 6 months. $5 here, $10 there, skimmed from grocery money and birthday gifts. He doesn't know about the burner phone tucked inside an old tampon box, or the storage unit rented under my maiden name. Most importantly, he doesn't know that I've been planning this day for over a year. Chapter 2. The Performance. The Hendersons arrive precisely at 7, and I watch them through our front window as they walk up the path. Robert checking his phone one last time, Patricia adjusting her expression into the bright smile she wears for social occasions. They could be any successful couple in any suburb in America, and perhaps that's exactly the point. "Charlotte, you look radiant," Patricia says as she air kisses my cheeks, though I catch her studying my face with unusual intensity. "Marriage certainly agrees with you." "We try our best," I reply, and something in my tone makes her pause. For just a moment, our eyes meet, and I see a flash of recognition there, the look of one performer acknowledging another. The evening unfolds with its usual choreographed precision. But tonight I find myself watching the spaces between the words, the glances that don't quite land where they're supposed to, the way Robert and Patricia maintain their careful distance even when they're sitting on the same sofa. Thomas performs his usual role as the charming host, but I notice how often his eyes dart to me, checking my performance, monitoring my responses. "Thomas was just telling me about his new client in Chicago," Robert says, swirling his whiskey. "Quite a coup, landing the Morrison account." I murmur, though I remember Thomas being in Chicago last month for what he claimed was a different client entirely. The lie is so casual, so automatic, that I wonder if he even remembers which version is true. "Charlie's been such a support through all the traveling," Thomas adds, his hand finding my knee in a gesture that once would have seemed affectionate, but now feels proprietary. "I don't know what I'd do without her." Patricia's eyes meet mine across the coffee table, and in them I see the same question I've been asking myself for months. How long can we keep pretending that everything is perfect? When Thomas makes his usual joke about my adorable technology struggles, I laugh on cue. But this time, I notice Patricia doesn't join in. Instead, she watches me with the careful attention of someone who's become an expert at reading between the lines of other people's performances. Charlie's still using that ancient phone, he says, pulling out his latest iPhone to show Robert some app or another. I keep telling her to upgrade, but you know how women are with change. Oh, Thomas, I say with a self-deprecating smile, you know I'm hopeless with all that complicated stuff. I can barely manage to send a text message. It's a lie, of course. I've become quite proficient with technology lately, particularly with things like encrypted messaging apps and GPS spoofing software. But Thomas doesn't need to know that. None of them do. As the evening winds down, I excuse myself to freshen up, but instead, I slip into the utility closet and retrieve the envelope. Inside are photographs, dozens of them, documenting things that would destroy Thomas's carefully constructed reputation. Credit card statements showing charges to hotels I've never been to. Screenshots of dating profiles he thinks I don't know about. Text message exchanges with women whose names I've memorized like a prayer. But the photographs are just insurance. The real evidence is stored digitally, backed up in multiple locations, ready to be released with a single click if anything goes wrong tonight. When I return to the living room, Thomas is walking the Hendersons to the door. His arm slips around me as we wave goodbye, and for anyone watching, we look like the perfect couple. Attractive, successful, completely in love. Lovely evening, Patricia calls out as Robert starts their car. We'll have to do it again soon, I call back, knowing we never will. As their taillights disappear down our tree-lined street, Thomas closes the door and turns to me with a smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. Well, he says, loosening his tie, that went well. Though you seemed a bit off tonight. Everything all right? This is how it always begins. The subtle accusation disguised as concern. The way he makes me doubt my own perceptions. For years, I've responded with apologies and explanations, scrambling to reassure him that everything is fine, that I'm fine, that we're fine. Not tonight. Actually, Thomas, I say, meeting his gaze steadily, we need to talk. Chapter 3, The Unraveling. Something in my tone must alert him, because his expression shifts, becoming more guarded. Oh? About what? I walk to the living room and sit in the chair across from his usual spot on the sofa. Not beside him, where I usually settle for our evening conversations, but across from him, like an adversary. The symbolism isn't lost on him. His jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. About us, about our marriage, about the lies we've been living. Thomas sits slowly, his movements careful and controlled. I'm not sure I understand what you mean. I think you do. I reach into the envelope and pull out a photograph. Thomas entering a hotel with a woman I don't recognize. Her hand in his. Both of them laughing at some private joke. Would you like to explain this? For a moment, his mask slips and I see something raw and ugly flash across his features. Then, just as quickly, it's gone, replaced by his practiced expression of wounded innocence. Charlie, I can explain. Don't. The word comes out harder than I intended, and I see him flinch. Don't you dare try to gaslight me. Not tonight. Not anymore. I pull out more photographs, spreading them across the coffee table like a dealer laying out cards. Thomas with different women, at different hotels, on different days. A pattern of betrayal so extensive, it would have impressed me if it weren't so devastating. How long have you known? He asks, quietly. And there's something in his voice I've never heard before. Fear. Long enough. I don't tell him about the private investigator I hired 8 months ago, or how easy it was to track his movements once I started paying attention. Men like Thomas become sloppy when they think they're smarter than everyone around them. The question is, what are we going to do about it? Thomas leans forward, his hands clasped together, and I can almost see his mind working. Calculating his next move. This is what he does. He assesses the situation, finds the weakness, exploits it. He's done it in business, and he's done it to me, and now he thinks he can do it again. Charlie, I know this looks bad, but you have to understand. I understand perfectly. I stand up, pacing to the window that overlooks our manicured front yard. You married me because I was convenient, young enough to be impressive, successful enough to be an asset, malleable enough to be controlled. You've been systematically isolating me from my friends, my family, my career, until I had nothing left but you. And then you cheated because you were bored, or because you could, or because you never really loved me in the first place. When I turn back to face him, Thomas is staring at me with something approaching shock. This isn't the Charlotte he knows, the one who apologizes for having opinions, who second-guesses every word before she speaks. That's not true, he says, and I can hear something desperate creeping into his voice. For the first time, his perfect composure is cracking. Isn't it? I walk back to the coffee table and pick up another photograph. This one showing Thomas with his arm around a young blonde who looks disturbingly similar to how I looked 5 years ago. Tell me, Thomas, is she your next project? Is she already learning to laugh at all your jokes, to agree with all your opinions, to make herself smaller so you can feel bigger? You're being... He stops himself, and I see the moment he realizes what he was about to say. Dramatic, the word he's used to dismiss my feelings countless times before. Go ahead, I say quietly. Say it. Tell me I'm being dramatic. Tell me I'm overreacting. Tell me I'm too sensitive, or that I'm misremembering things, or that I'm making a big deal out of nothing. Use the words you've trained me to fear. His face goes pale. Charlotte, I never meant. When was the last time you asked me what I wanted? I interrupt, my voice gaining strength. Not what I wanted for dinner, or what movie I wanted to watch, but what I actually wanted from life. When was the last time you were interested in my thoughts about anything more complex than which wine pairs with salmon? Thomas opens his mouth to respond, then closes it again. I can see him searching his memory, trying to find a single instance, and coming up empty. The silence stretches between us, heavy with the weight of 5 years of one-sided conversations. You turn me into a supporting character in my own life, I continue, my voice gaining strength with each word. But here's what you never understood, Thomas. I was pretending too. Chapter 4. The Revelation. I return to my chair and pull out a manila folder I've been saving for this moment. Thomas watches warily as I open it and remove a stack of documents. You think you know me, I say, placing the first document on the table between us. You think I'm the sweet, simple woman you married. But Charlotte Pierce, the real Charlotte Pierce, she never really went away. She's been planning. The document is a bank statement showing an account Thomas has never seen, with a balance that makes his eyes widen. He reaches for it, but I pull it back. 6 months of careful saving, I explain. Amazing how much you can accumulate when you pay attention to every penny. Did you know you spend $43 a week on coffee? That you tip exactly 15%, no matter how good the service? That you buy lunch at the same 3 restaurants on a rotating schedule? I can see him processing this information, realizing that the woman he thought he knew has been studying him, cataloging his habits, planning for contingencies he never imagined. The second account has even more, I continue, placing another statement on the table. Contributions from freelance editing work I've been doing secretly for 6 months. Remember when you said I should focus on our home instead of my career? I found other ways. Late nights, early mornings, working while you were traveling for business. I can see him processing this information, realizing that the woman he thought he controlled completely has been building an independent life right under his nose. There's also this, I add, pulling out a small recorder, the kind private investigators use. 3 months of conversations between us, carefully documented. Would you like to hear your greatest hits? Charlie, you wouldn't understand the complexities of my business. That's cute, But let me explain how it really works. You're being too sensitive about this. Thomas's face is pale now, but there's something else building behind his eyes. Not just fear, but a kind of recognition. As if he's hearing himself clearly for the first time. What exactly are you trying to say, Charlotte? I'm saying that I've been preparing for this conversation for almost a year. I'm saying that I've documented every betrayal, every lie, every moment you made me feel like I was losing my mind. I'm saying that I have enough evidence to destroy your reputation, your career, and your carefully constructed life. I pull out my phone, not the ancient model Thomas mocked earlier, but a sophisticated device I've kept hidden. With trembling fingers, I stop the recording app I'd started when our guests left. You've been recording this? Thomas's voice is barely a whisper. I tried to start 3 months ago, but I kept losing my nerve. Tonight was the first time I managed to keep it running. I set the phone on the table between us, my hand shaking slightly. I'm not some master strategist, Thomas. I'm just a woman who finally got tired of being afraid. The blood drains from his face. Charlotte, recording someone without consent? I spent 2 weeks researching the legality before I even attempted it. We're in a one-party consent state for private conversations between spouses in our own home. I take a shaky breath. But honestly, I wasn't sure I'd have the courage to actually use it until tonight. He sits heavily, as if his legs can no longer support him. What exactly are you trying to say, Charlotte? I'm saying that I've been documenting our relationship with the same meticulous attention you bring to your business deals. I'm saying that I've been preparing for this conversation for almost a year, not out of malice, but out of necessity. I pause, letting that sink in. I'm saying that I have enough evidence to tell a very different story about our marriage than the one you've been telling yourself. Thomas stands abruptly, and for a moment, I think he might try to grab the phone from me. Instead, he begins pacing, running his hands through his perfectly styled hair. What do you want? He asks finally. I want you to listen, I say. Really listen, probably for the first time in our marriage. Because I'm going to tell you a story about a woman who lost herself so gradually she didn't even notice it was happening. Chapter 5. The True Story. Once upon a time, I begin, my voice taking on the cadence of a fairy tale, though there's nothing magical about what I'm about to reveal. There was a young woman who thought she'd found her prince. He was charming and successful, and he made her feel like the most important person in the world. At least, in the beginning. Thomas has stopped pacing and is watching me with wary attention. The prince had very specific ideas about how a princess should behave. She should be beautiful, but not too beautiful. It made other men look, and that made the prince jealous. She should be intelligent, but not too intelligent. It made the prince feel insecure. She should have opinions, but they should align perfectly with his. Charlotte, I'm not finished. The steel in my voice stops him cold. At first, the princess thought these were reasonable requests. She loved the prince, after all. And what was love, if not compromise? So she began to change, bit by bit. She stopped wearing red because the prince said it was too bold. She quit her book club because the prince said the women were gossipy. She turned down a promotion because the prince said her career was putting stress on their relationship. I stand and walk to our wedding photo on the mantel, studying the faces of two people I barely recognize. The princess told herself she was choosing love over everything else. But really, she was choosing the path of least resistance. It was easier to become what the prince wanted than to fight for who she really was. And the prince? He was so pleased with his perfectly trained princess that he decided he deserved even more perfection. So he went looking for it in hotel rooms and dating apps, and anywhere else he could find women naive enough to believe his lies. When I turn back to Thomas, his face is a mask of guilt and anger. That's not how it happened. Isn't it? I challenge. Then tell me your version, Thomas. Tell me how the devoted husband justified betraying his wife. Tell me how the man who claimed to love me found it so easy to lie to my face every single day. He's silent for a long moment, and I can see the calculation in his eyes. He's trying to find the angle that will get him out of this, the words that will make me back down, apologize, return to my role as the understanding wife. I never meant for any of this to happen, he says, and for the first time tonight, his voice cracks slightly. When we first met, you were everything I thought I wanted. Intelligent, accomplished, beautiful. But somewhere along the way, I started feeling like I wasn't enough. Like you were going to realize you could do better. So you decided to make sure I couldn't? I didn't plan it that way. It happened gradually. Every time you questioned one of my decisions, every time you had an opinion that conflicted with mine, every time you succeeded at something without my help, it felt like you were pulling away from me. So I found ways to keep us close. By making me smaller. He nods, unable to meet my eyes. I told myself I was protecting our relationship. That couples should want the same things, think alike, support each other completely. I convinced myself that your independence was a threat to our marriage. And when that wasn't enough to fill the void inside you, I looked for validation elsewhere. Women who thought I was impressive, who didn't challenge me, who made me feel like the man I thought I was supposed to be. He looks up at me then, and I see something I haven't seen in years. Genuine remorse mixed with fear. I know how that sounds. I know what I've done to you, to us. It's the most honest thing he said to me in our entire marriage, but it doesn't change what needs to happen next. My own things, I repeat. You mean like the charity work you encouraged me to do because it made you look good? The cooking classes you suggested because you were tired of restaurant food? The yoga studio you bought me a membership to because you said I seemed tense? That's not. You isolated me so completely that I had no life outside of you, and then you used that isolation as an excuse to cheat. That's not loneliness, Thomas. That's cruelty. Chapter 6. The Price of Silence. I return to my chair and pull out the last item from the envelope, a business card. Janet Morrison, private investigator, I say, placing it on the table. I found her through my cousin Lisa. Do you remember Lisa? She went through a messy divorce last year. Janet's been documenting your activities for 4 months. 4 months? Thomas looks genuinely shocked. But the evidence you showed me goes back further than that, yes. It turns out you're not as careful as you think you are. Hotel receipts in jacket pockets, credit card statements you forgot to redirect, text messages you didn't delete thoroughly enough. I lean back in my chair. I didn't hire Janet to spy on you, Thomas. I hired her to teach me how to pay attention. Thomas stands abruptly and begins pacing, running his hands through his hair. How long have you been planning this? I haven't been planning anything. I've been reacting. Every time you made me feel crazy, every time you dismissed my concerns, every time you came home smelling like someone else's perfume and acted like I was imagining it, I took one more small step toward protecting myself. Thomas goes very still. What? I was going to take pills, something peaceful, something that wouldn't leave a mess for you to clean up. Even in death, I was trying to be the perfect wife. I open the letter and begin to read. Thomas, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I want you to know that this isn't your fault. I've been struggling with depression, and I couldn't find a way to get better. You've been a wonderful husband, and I hope someday you'll be able to forgive me for not being strong enough to stay. I look up at him, and his face is ashen. Can you imagine? Even in my goodbye letter, I was protecting you. I was going to let you play the grieving widower, probably find a new wife within a year, someone younger and more grateful for your attention. Charlotte, you can't be serious. I was completely serious. I had the pills. I had the timing worked out. I was going to do it on a day when you had meetings all afternoon, so you'd have an alibi. So no one would suspect you of anything worse than being married to a mentally unstable woman. I fold the letter carefully and place it back in the envelope. But then something interesting happened. I was researching the most effective methods. I wanted to be thorough, even in suicide, and I stumbled across an article about gaslighting. Do you know what that is, Thomas? He doesn't answer, but I can see from his expression that he knows exactly what it is. It's a form of psychological manipulation where someone makes you question your own reality. They lie, they deny, they minimize, they blame, all designed to make you feel like you're losing your mind. The article had a checklist of behaviors, and Thomas, you scored perfectly on every single one. I pull out my phone again and scroll to a saved article. Listen to this. The victim begins to doubt their own memory, perception, and judgment. They become anxious, confused, and unable to trust themselves. They apologize frequently and feel like they can't do anything right. They make excuses for their partner's behavior and withdraw from friends and family. Each word hits him like a physical blow, and I can see him recognizing himself in the description. That's when I realized I wasn't mentally ill, Thomas. I was being systematically destroyed by someone who claimed to love me. And once I understood that, I couldn't unknow it. The princess in my story? She woke up. Chapter 7, The Awakening. So I started paying attention. I continue, my voice growing stronger with each revelation. Really paying attention for the first time in years. I started keeping a journal, documenting every conversation, every subtle put-down. Every time you made me feel like I was overreacting or being too sensitive. I pull out a small notebook. Its pages thick with my handwriting. Did you know that in the past 6 months, you've interrupted me 1,247 times? I counted. You've dismissed my opinions 89 times with phrases like, "That's cute," or "You wouldn't understand." You've made decisions about our life, our finances, our social calendar, our future, without consulting me 34 times. Thomas is staring at the notebook like it's a weapon, which in many ways it is. I also started researching you, I continue. Really researching, not just accepting the version of yourself you presented to me. I hired a private investigator, a woman named Janet Morrison, excellent credentials, very thorough. She found so much more than just the affairs, Thomas. I pull out another folder, this one much thicker. Did you know that your business partner is embezzling from your firm? Janet found evidence that he's been skimming from client accounts for over 2 years. She also found evidence that you know about it and have been using it as leverage against him. Thomas's face cycles through several emotions: surprise, fear, anger, and finally, a cold calculation I recognize all too well. You've been busy, he says, and there's something different in his voice now. Something that makes me glad I've prepared for every contingency. I have. I've also been learning some very interesting things about our prenuptial agreement. Did you know that infidelity voids the financial protections you thought you'd secured? Amazing what a good lawyer can find when they really dig into the details. You hired a lawyer? I hired several lawyers. One specializes in divorce proceedings, one in financial fraud, and one in domestic abuse cases. Yes, Thomas, what you've done to me qualifies as abuse. Not the kind that leaves bruises, but the kind that leaves scars just the same. I lean back in my chair, feeling more powerful than I have in years. I've also made copies of everything, all the evidence, all the recordings, all the financial documents. They're stored in multiple locations, and are set to be released automatically if anything happens to me. What do you mean, anything happens to you? I mean that if I have an accident, if I disappear, if I suddenly become suicidal again, or if I'm found dead under any circumstances, everything becomes public. Your affairs, your business dealings, the psychological abuse, all of it. Your reputation, your career, your freedom, gone. Thomas is very quiet now, and I can see him processing the implications of what I've just told him. So here's what's going to happen, I continue, pulling out a legal document. You're going to sign this amended separation agreement. You're going to agree to an immediate divorce with a very generous settlement for me. Generous enough that I can disappear if I choose to, or stay and rebuild my life if I prefer. You're going to liquidate half of all our assets and transfer them to accounts I control. And if I refuse? Then I release everything tomorrow. Your business partner gets arrested, your clients discover they can't trust you, and every woman you've ever cheated with gets a visit from a very determined journalist I know. Your perfect life becomes a very public disaster. I stand and walk to the window, looking out at the Hendersons' house across the street. Through their kitchen window, I can see Patricia loading dishes into their dishwasher. The same routine Thomas and I will perform in an hour, the same performance of domestic perfection we all maintain. You know what the strangest part is? I say without turning around. Patricia Henderson came to see me 3 weeks ago. Did you know that? What? Thomas stops pacing. She came for coffee while you were at work. Wanted to check in on me. Apparently, Robert's been having an affair with his secretary for 2 years, and she's known about it for 1. She wanted to know if I'd noticed anything unusual about you. I turn back to face him, and his expression has shifted from shock to something approaching terror. I told her no, of course. I told her you were the perfect husband, that our marriage was everything it appeared to be. But afterward, I realized something. We're all performing the same play, aren't we? All pretending our marriages are perfect, while the men we married are living completely different lives. Charlotte, Patricia Henderson is bitter and paranoid. Is she? Or is she just awake? I move closer to him. After she left, I started paying attention to things I'd been trained to ignore. Your late meetings that ended at hotels instead of offices. Your business trips that took you to cities where your clients aren't located. Your phone calls that you suddenly needed to take in the garage. But here's the thing, Thomas. I don't actually want to destroy you. I just want to be free of you. Sign the papers, let me go, and you can rebuild your life however you choose. Fight me, and I'll make sure you have nothing left to rebuild. Chapter 8. The Choice. The silence stretches between us for several minutes. I can hear the grandfather clock in the hallway, ticking, marking the seconds of Thomas's decision. When he finally speaks, his voice is quiet and measured. You've thought of everything, haven't you? I've had a lot of time to think. You made sure of that when you eliminated every other focus in my life. He walks to the window and stands beside me, both of us looking out at the street we've called home for so long. For a moment, we could be any married couple, contemplating their future together. The irony isn't lost on me. I do love you, Charlotte, he says quietly, in my way. I know you do, but your way of loving is possessing, controlling, diminishing. It's not love, Thomas, it's ownership, and I'm not property to be owned. When did you become so hard? The question stings, but not in the way he intends. I'm not hard. I'm awake. There's a difference. He turns to look at me, and for the first time in years, I see him seeing me, not the Charlotte he created, but the woman I actually am. I don't know when I became the kind of man who needed to control his wife to feel secure. The admission hangs in the air between us, raw and honest in a way our conversations haven't been in years. The affairs weren't about you not being enough, he continues quietly. They were about me not being enough, about me trying to prove to myself that I was still desirable, still powerful, still the man I thought I needed to be. Even if it meant destroying me in the process? I told myself you didn't know, so it wasn't hurting you. I told myself our marriage was separate from those moments of weakness. I compartmentalized everything so I could live with myself. But you did know it was hurting me. Every time you came home distant, every time you criticized something I'd done, every time you made me feel like I was failing as a wife, you were making room for your guilt by making me the problem. He nods slowly, and I can see the weight of recognition settling on his shoulders. I made you carry the burden of my choices without even telling you what that burden was. It's the most honest thing he said to me in our entire marriage. and strangely, it makes me sad rather than angry. This is the man I might have loved if he'd ever let me see him. It doesn't excuse what you did, I say. No, it doesn't. He walks to the coffee table and picks up the separation agreement, scanning the terms I've outlined. This is very thorough. I learned from the best. You taught me to pay attention to details. He looks up at me with something that might be respect. You're not the woman I married. No, I'm not. I'm better. Thomas reads through the document slowly, his hands visibly shaking. When he reaches the financial terms, he looks up sharply. Charlotte, this would leave me with almost nothing. It would leave you with exactly what I had when I married you. A chance to start over. I lean forward. The difference is, you'll start over with the knowledge of what you did wrong. That's more than I had. He sets the document down and looks at me with something I haven't seen before. Genuine fear mixed with what might be respect. You really thought this through. I had to. When you spent 5 years being told you can't trust your own judgment, you don't get to make impulsive decisions about your future. Thomas picks up the pen, then sets it down again. If I sign this, I lose everything I've worked for. If you don't sign it, you lose it anyway, plus your reputation and probably your freedom when the financial irregularities at your firm come to light. I pause. But if you do sign it, you get something you've never had before, the chance to be honest about who you are and why you need to control people. He looks at the pen again, and I can see the war playing out across his face. Finally, he speaks. I don't know how to be the person you want me to be. I don't want you to be anyone, Thomas. I want you to figure out who you actually are, underneath all the performance and manipulation. I want you to get help. I want you to never do to another woman what you did to me. And if I can't, if this is just who I am, then you'll be alone, but at least you'll be honest about it. He nods slowly, picks up the pen, and after a long moment, signs his name. His signature is shaky, uncertain, nothing like the confident flourish he usually produces. There, he says quietly. It's done. I sign my name beside his, and with that stroke of ink, Charlotte Brennan ceases to exist. I am Charlotte Pierce again, for the first time in 5 years. Chapter 9. The Reckoning. So what now? Thomas asks as I place the signed document back in its folder. Now you pack a bag and stay at your brother's tonight. Give me space to figure out what comes next. And then? Then you start over. Find a therapist. Deal with your need to control people. Figure out how to have a relationship based on equality instead of power. Maybe learn to love someone without trying to remake them in your image. He nods, though I can see the question in his eyes. What about you? What will you do? It's a good question, and one I've been thinking about for months. I'm going to remember who I was before I met you. I'm going to travel. Remember how I always wanted to see Italy? I'm going to write again. Did you know I was working on a novel when we met? I'm going to make friends who know the real me, not the version I performed for your approval. I'm sorry, he says, and I can hear that he means it. For all of it. You deserved better. Yes, I did. But I also let it happen. I chose the easy path too many times. Chose peace over truth. Chose your approval over my own self-respect. I won't make that mistake again. Thomas goes upstairs to pack, and I remain in the living room, surrounded by the evidence of our deception. The perfect house, the perfect furniture, the perfect life. All of it built on lies and compromise and the gradual erosion of everything I once was. But not anymore. I walk to the mantel and take down our wedding photo, studying the faces of two people who thought they knew what love looked like. The Charlotte in the photo is radiant, believing she's found her happily ever after. The Thomas beside her is confident, certain he's won the prize he deserves. Neither of them understood that real love isn't about winning or losing, possessing or being possessed. Real love is about seeing each other clearly and choosing to stay anyway. It's about growing together instead of one person diminishing so the other can feel bigger. We never had that. We had performance. We had transaction. We had the appearance of love without any of its substance. When Thomas comes back downstairs with his suitcase, I'm sitting in the living room with a glass of wine, reading a book I haven't touched in years. My own journal from before we married, full of dreams and ambitions I'd forgotten I once had. "I'll be at David's," he says, "when you're ready to talk about the practical details. My lawyer will contact yours," I say without looking up. From now on, all communication goes through them. He stands there for a moment longer, and I can feel him wanting to say something else, perhaps looking for some sign that this isn't really the end. But we both know it is. This conversation has been the most honest we've been in years, and honesty has revealed that we never really knew each other at all. "Goodbye, Charlotte," he says finally. "Goodbye, Thomas." The door closes behind him with a soft click, and for the first time in 5 years, I am alone in my own life. Chapter 10, The Beginning. I don't sleep that night. Instead, I walk through the house we shared, really looking at it for the first time. Every room tells the story of Charlotte Brennan, the woman who tried so hard to be perfect that she forgot to be real. The kitchen with its spotless surfaces and color-coordinated accessories. The living room arranged for maximum visual impact rather than comfort. The bedroom with its carefully selected artwork that matches the curtains but reveals nothing about the people who sleep there. It's a beautiful house, and it feels nothing like home. At dawn, I make myself coffee, the way I like it, with cream and honey, and sit on the front steps watching the sunrise. Mrs. Patterson from next door waves as she retrieves her newspaper, and I wave back, wondering what she'll think when she learns about the divorce. Will she be shocked? Will she claim she saw it coming? Will she wonder what really went on behind our perfectly manicured facade? It doesn't matter anymore. My phone buzzes with a text from my sister Kate, the first communication we've had in months. Thomas always found reasons why I couldn't visit her, couldn't spend holidays with my family, couldn't maintain the relationships that predated our marriage. "Saw your light on early. Everything okay?" The text reads. Kate lives 3,000 miles away, but somehow she sensed that something has changed. I type back without hesitation. Everything is perfect. For the first time in years, everything is perfect. She calls immediately. "Charlie, what's going on? You sound different." "I left Thomas," I say, and hearing the words out loud makes them real in a way they weren't before. "Actually, I'm divorcing him. It's complicated, but it's done." There's silence on the other end of the line. Then, "Oh, honey, are you okay? Do you need me to come out there?" "I'm more than okay," I say, and I realize it's true. I'm free. We talk for an hour, and I tell her everything. Not the edited version I've been sharing for years, but the truth. About the isolation, the manipulation, the slow erosion of my identity. About the affairs and the evidence and the confrontation. About the woman I became and the woman I'm determined to be again. "I'm proud of you," Kate says when I finish. It takes courage to admit when something isn't working, even more courage to do something about it. After we hang up, I make a list of everyone I need to call, everyone I need to reconnect with, everyone I need to apologize to for disappearing from their lives. The list is longer than I expected, and that makes me both sad and hopeful. Sad because it represents all the relationships I sacrificed for a marriage that was never real. Hopeful because it means I have a foundation to rebuild on. Epilogue 18 months later. The small apartment I rent on the east side of town is nothing like the house Thomas and I shared in Millbrook Heights. The kitchen barely fits 2 people. The bedroom faces a parking lot instead of landscaped gardens. And the neighbors sometimes argue loudly enough that I can hear them through the thin walls. I love it completely. I'm sitting at my second-hand dining table, working on revisions to the novel that started as therapy and somehow became something more. My editor's latest notes are scattered across the surface, challenging me to go deeper into the messy complexity of recovery. The protagonist seems to have everything figured out by the end. She wrote in the margins of Chapter 10. But trauma doesn't resolve itself so neatly. Show us the stumbles, the days when she questions everything, the ways her old patterns try to reassert themselves. She's right, of course. The truth is messier than fiction, and my own healing has been far from linear. There are still mornings when I wake up and instinctively check the clock, wondering if I'm running late for some obligation I can't quite remember. Until I realize there's no one to disappoint anymore except myself. There are still moments when I catch myself apologizing for taking up space, for having opinions, for existing too loudly in my own life. The therapy helps, though Dr. Reyna was honest from the beginning that unlearning 5 years of systematic manipulation would take time. Healing isn't about forgetting what happened to you, she told me during one of our early sessions. It's about changing your relationship to those memories, learning to trust yourself again. Some days I feel strong and clear-eyed, writing with a confidence I'd forgotten I possessed. Other days I draft emails to Thomas that I never send, second-guessing decisions I've already made, wondering if I was too harsh, too calculating, too unwilling to forgive. My phone rings, interrupting my spiral of self-doubt. Kate's name appears on the screen, and I answer on the second ring. "How are the revisions going?" she asks without preamble. My sister has become expert at reading my moods over the phone, picking up the subtle shifts in my voice that signal when I'm struggling. Slowly, honestly, I lean back in my chair and look around the little apartment that has become my sanctuary. My editor wants me to show more of the hard parts, the setbacks, the confusion. The way recovery isn't just a straight line toward happiness. That's good, Kate says. The real story is always more interesting than the version where everything works out perfectly. Through my window, I can see Mrs. Chen from 3B hanging laundry on her balcony. Her movements efficient and unhurried. She waves when she catches sight of me, and I wave back, still surprised by these small moments of connection with neighbors who know me only as Charlotte. Not as half of a couple, not as someone's wife. I got a call from Janet yesterday, I tell Kate, referring to the private investigator who helped me document Thomas's affairs. Thomas has been asking questions about me, where I'm living, what I'm doing, whether I'm seeing anyone. Are you worried? I consider this. 6 months ago, the thought of Thomas trying to find me would have sent me into a panic. Now, it feels like evidence of his inability to let go. To accept that our story has ended. No, I say, and I'm surprised to realize I mean it. I'm not his to worry about anymore. After we hang up, I return to my manuscript, but instead of working on the existing chapters, I open a new document. The words flow more easily than they have in weeks. Recovery is not a destination but a daily practice. It's choosing to trust your own perceptions even when doubt creeps in. It's learning to sit with loneliness without mistaking it for emptiness. It's understanding that the person you were before the trauma and the person you become after are both real, both valuable, both worthy of love. Some days you'll feel invincible, clear-eyed and certain of your worth. Other days, you'll question every decision. Wonder if you were too harsh or too kind, too trusting or too suspicious. Both experiences are part of the process. Both are necessary. The goal isn't to become someone new, but to remember who you always were, underneath the fear, beneath the performance, beyond the desperate need to be acceptable to someone who was never going to accept you as you truly are. I save the document and close my laptop, feeling something settle in my chest. Not the hard-won peace I'd expected when I first left Thomas, but something quieter and more sustainable. The knowledge that tomorrow I'll wake up in my imperfect apartment, make coffee the way I like it, and continue the ongoing work of being authentically myself. The phone buzzes with a text from a number I don't recognize. Charlotte, this is Patricia Henderson. I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I'd love to have coffee if you're free this week. I stare at the message for a long moment, remembering the woman who performed perfect wife duties across from me at countless dinner parties, who watched me with increasingly knowing eyes as my marriage crumbled. Then I typed back, "I'd like that very much." Because the truth is, we're all recovering from something. We're all learning to tell the difference between being alone and being lonely, between independence and isolation, between the relationships that diminish us and the ones that help us grow. I slip my phone into my pocket and step out onto my small balcony, watching the sun set over a city that feels like home in a way that beautiful house in Millbrook Heights never did. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new opportunities to practice courage, new chances to choose authenticity over acceptability. But tonight, I'm exactly where I need to be. The end.
Like this story? Subscribe for more original audio narratives that explore the complex psychological and social issues of modern life. Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear how this story resonated with your own experiences.